By 2050, Africa's working population will more than double, requiring the demand for more than 28 million jobs every year. As it stands, the continent contends with a burgeoning youth population, and the introduction of wide-scale technological shifts such as AI pose risks of deepening inequality and job losses if the AI adoption at scale is not implemented quickly. However, it seems the inroads are being made through small AI, which is an affordable, accessible application that runs on everyday devices, improving development across sectors such as agriculture, health and education. The World Bank Group hosted a dialogue titled People, Skills and Digital Innovation for Jobs in Africa. Let's listen in for more.
I think you have started it right in the sense that before we can talk about AI, the right AI response and impactful response and adoption in Africa, we need to diagnose, exactly what the challenges look like on ground. We're looking at a 60%, over 60% population under the age of 25 in Zambia and the sub-region, and you're looking at unemployment rates at over 18.1%, right? And also couple that with data, the lack of quality data, infrastructure that's needed for data to be able to move to advanced levels of AI modeling. When you couple all that, you then understand that when we're thinking in the lenses of responsible adoption, it really is synonymous with economic sovereignty and human development. And let me give this a proper breakdown. In the global north, when we talk about responsible AI adoption and impactful AI adoption, we are thinking about things like biases in, the algorithmic biases in judicial sentences. We're looking at things like protecting against copyright infringement using, in the generative space, or the greater fear of, AGI, which is, this idea that AI is going to become sentient and essentially take over humanity, right? And whereas those things are very important and not irrelevant to Africa, Africa sitting at over 18.1%, unemployment rate in certain regions. It is unresponsible, it's socially irresponsible for us to be pushing for AI that replaces humans with machine, right, in that automation process. So we normally advise what we call labor augmentation at BongoHive. This is where AI does not replace, but instead enables the human development space, essentially being able to create opportunity for youth to be able to gain jobs that are much easier to gain because AI is lowering the barriers to entry. For example, if you look at the work of extension officers in the agricultural space, that, essentially are supposed to be able to help understand or identify diseases early on in crops, empowering such people with a device, right, that allows for crop identification, the diseases in crops. It actually helps them be able to operate at a level of a veteran agronomist, even if they were not so educated in the very first place. So you're enabling them to be able to operate at that level. And it doesn't necessarily take jobs, but actually increases or extends the farmer extension network. And you can actually save more farmers that way by having that labor augmentation embedded. An example is also one with Colosso. It's a startup that we've worked closely at BongoHive. Understanding that there is a huge teacher-to-student ratio in schools in Africa, that context of responsible AI adoption played in with Colosso, in that they were able to identify that with that high ratio, the chances of a teacher having one-on-one with students is really a problem in schools. So you find that kids that will fall off from foundational numerical understanding may never recover. It may end up with them failing exams in future to low possibilities of employment. So Colosso has used adaptive AI to ensure that, these particular students, the pupils in class, are able to learn and be able to have AI adapting to how their learning curve is. And it gives them that one-on-one focus because they're able to then have adaptability. If they're struggling in multiplication, it adjusts the game level to teach them more about multiplication. So that cultural and contextual thought process about responsible AI adoption is what's going to stick and work for Africa. And then sticking to elements regarding our capabilities, right? The fact that we've got a huge supply side when it comes to the job market in Africa, we ought to be thinking around how it's not just enough to train, people and give them AI competent skills. We have to be thinking about the demand side of it how are we increasing SME productivity and production? Because if we train a lot of people with AI skills and yet there are no jobs, we're looking at a 56% net there where people now be seated and now be frustrated, right? So we need to think about capabilities for institutions. How do we have SMEs, for example, begin to increase digital transformation where they're able to use AI in their value chain such that they're enabling others to come in to be able to do that work. And as skills grow, we have that consistency where there's funding for SMEs, there's support for growth, there's understanding for exportation. And those are the things that's going to make Africa really progress. And that's when we are going to have that cultural and contextually relevant adoption and impact in the African space.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, Mapalo. You have left us with food for thought around labor substitution, technology, and labor augmentation technology. And shameless plug here, we do have a report coming out later this year, an asset where we try to categorize jobs on the continent that are likely to be displaced by AI and emerging technology. So I'm looking forward to that, and we will circulate when that comes out. Now, Monica, let me come to you. Much of the conversation around technology focuses around its promise to transform education, but the skills gap remains wider. What basics in, and do you see a need for specific tools or programs to help marginalized youth, especially young women, transition into better work opportunities in science and technology?
Thank you, Mona. Actually, this is a very important question because, as you said, there is some evidence that the skills gap in Africa might be widening and not necessarily closing. But before answering the question of where government should invest, I must say that at Save the Children, we work with the most vulnerable populations. Thus, my views are informed by our experience. So I want to start by reframing the skills gap as a foundational challenge and not only a challenge of technologies. Because if we take a step back, we can easily see that it's not only about access to devices and the internet. It is about equally deeper challenges like foundational skills, inclusion, and transition to work pathways. And so once we see the skills gap challenge through this lens, it is easier to know where governments should invest. I think that governments should invest in three key priorities. They should invest in programs that build foundational and digital skills, in ensuring inclusion, and creating clear pathways from education to skills and from skills to work. So when we talk about foundational skills, of course, I want to start by mentioning foundational literacy and numeracy, because as we know, those are prerequisites for participation in STEM and digital work. But as our panelists, and as we said at the beginning of the conversation, we must talk about the importance of soft skills and employability skills, right? Just look at the answers of our panelists and the conversation we had at the beginning about the importance of life skills. And I have been around this field and I've talked to multiple employers, and they again and again say that soft skills like curiosity, critical thinking, empathy, and especially self-directed learning are becoming essential in fast-changing labor markets.
Well, that was Monica Caminiti, Senior Director for Skills to Succeed Program and Save the Children, and Mapalo Lukashi, Data and Artificial Intelligence Lead at BongoHive Zambia, sharing their insights on Africa's jobs challenge.